Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to another 80s throwback here. I've been trying to get back to creating some of these 80s related videos for Mondays. As a refresher or for anybody new, aside from the main point of this channel simply being me sharing films I enjoy, I usually, focus on horror or the occasional borderline forgotten 80s film. Sometimes films outside of those kind of sneak in here and there, but for the most part, that's what I focus on. So I'm wanting to get back into posting more 80s related films, particularly on Mondays, especially comedies which are borderline forgotten. The kind that people hear the title and think, yeah, I think I might have seen that one on cable back in the day. The name is familiar, just to see if they actually hold up. So for this one, I chose a film that was actually really difficult to track down, and that film is Moving Violations from 1985. Now this one is starring many recognizable faces from around that time, such as John Murray, who in this role has several moments where he's sounding a lot like his big brother Bill Murray. We also have Jennifer Tilly, Brian Backer, Ned Eisenberg, Wendy Jo Sperber, Fred Willard, Sally Kellerman, and even a cameo by Clara Peller, otherwise known as the Where's the Beef Lady from those Wendy's commercials back in the 80s. I even spotted a very small role by none other than Don Cheadle in what I believe is only his second role ever. But as far as what this film is actually about, the synopsis is as follows. The goofy students of a remedial driver's education class find themselves butting heads with their abusive police instructors. Basic and to the point, 80s comedy in full effect here, not just in the synopsis, but in the execution, as this one really kind of like speaks to the comedies, of the time. Quirky, eccentric characters, silly situation, cops coming across as like these bumbling fools, some sexual innuendo, and, a lead who's kind of like a mix of Han Solo and a stand-up comedian in his eyes, let's just say. And plenty of humor situations which run like scenes that have been kind of rewritten and stitched into this main story of our characters attending this driving school. Like various other 80s comedies, the driver's school aspect of this is not really the point. It feels more like they're just putting these scenes in and around that situation. So let's take a film like Better Off Dead. It's not about skiing, it's not about Christmas, it's not about school. There's a lot of scenes in those situations, but mainly it's a breakup comedy set with those situations in it. One could replace the sport, the holiday, and the locations, and it would work, just as well, in my opinion. Which is why I think sometimes these 80s films kind of blend together when you, think back on them with those rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia. But anyways, with Moving Violations, it is a great representation, which I feel in the case of this film specifically, it's sorely overlooked, borderline forgotten, and was definitely worth revisiting. Now, John Murray, as I mentioned, who I just saw this past holiday season in Scrooged, where he played the younger brother of our lead, Bill Murray, brothers in real life. He has very similar mannerisms here and there to Bill Murray. In some of his speech, just a little bit here and there, and nothing to be too distracting, but every now and then something sticks out that really reminds me of Bill Murray. Just a moment here and there, like a look or an inflection. But he kind of leads this ensemble cast in a way, and there are even parts where they even try to like tone down his comedy a bit to make things a little bit more believable, because if he was quite as clownish as he is in this movie in real life, he would definitely get in some serious trouble. So they do try to balance him out, make it clear that even though it's ensemble, he's kind of like the head of this kind of, bringing everything together. There's even times in it where his character tries to pull away from the silliness, tries to explain his situation about his traffic offense, tries to clear things up with one of the police officers, but when all that's kind of thrown back in his face and he's threatened, and more is revealed about, this class being made intentionally hard so that way people will fail the test and their impounded vehicles can be then sold off for a profit. The gloves are off and he's ready to set everything in full motion to stop this from happening, get their cars back, and expose their instructor. Hilarious hijinks ensue. Now, of course, this isn't just a story of revenge, of sticking it to the man, as much as, the comedy is kind of unrelated to their specific situation. Like, what I mean by that is, it takes place around a driving school. We do have some driving school related scenes in here, but a lot of it seems to be like these separate little scenes that all seem to be plugged in. Such as Wendy Jo Sperber's character, this hypochondriac who mistakes a mechanic played by Fred Willard, who goes by the name Doc as he works at his auto clinic, she mistakes him as, for being a real doctor, and ends up trying some of the advice that he gives her kind of on herself. And this is advice that he gave her thinking that she's talking about a car. So we definitely get some hilarious stuff of her trying to lube up her rear end and get out on the freeway full speed, let's just say. We also have one character getting together with a girl who outside of class is definitely much more wild than what he's used to, and much more younger. We also have this old woman who can't see well and always getting herself into bad situations. Jennifer Tilly with her high and soft voice, actually, being a rocket scientist. More on that a little bit later. But especially, I would have to say the character that I liked the most was the one played by Ned Eisenberg, who I've seen in a few other things around this time, such as The Manhattan Project, that John Lithgow film about the kid making an atomic bomb. He plays a true horror nerd in this one. And two of his scenes really stick out to me. One, which is where he's in class trying to make conversation with Jennifer Tilly, bringing up stuff about Friday the 13th, and she's just not into it at all. He just fails miserably with that. Always thought that was kind of funny when you try to bring up conversation and the other person cannot relate at all. But especially, I would say there's a scene where one of the characters is stressed about his dad's car being impounded, and that he needs it so he can pick up his dad at the airport, or he's going to get in a lot of trouble. He's all stressed out, and this character just says, that they recommend that they go and rent the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, give it a watch, because it'll make them feel better. I gotta say, that's some great representation for what many of us in the horror community refer to as horror therapy. But back to the story of this main film instead of all this rambling here. Our characters are all just trying to pass this test to get their cars back, and then along the way finding out about this issue with their cars, trying to have them sold, expose the instructor and somebody else behind it to the, about this plan to sell their cars. And there's a lot of very funny scenes, both directly related and in the periphery of that situation. Now, one of them in the periphery, which resulted in some massive disappointment for me when I was younger, was one with John Murray and Jennifer Tilly, where they go to NASA and, where she works, and they end up in the anti-gravity chamber, floating around and eventually getting it on. I cannot tell you my disappointment when I found out as a kid that there's no such thing as an anti-gravity chamber, unless you count that vomit comet, or vomit rocket, whatever it's called, the plane that kind of drops out and gives you the zero gravity feel. Anyways, now this is not a perfect film. Like I said, the scenes seem very separate and kind of stitched around this central plot. They're not as directly related to the driver's ed portion of it. Of course, because of that, it's not very deep. There's no subtext. It's not supposed to. It's just what I was looking for at the time that I sat down with it. A really silly 80s throwback comedy that I can unplug my brain during, which is more than worth checking out. And speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this quick little video here for Moving Violations from 1985, which at the time of this video is available nowhere. I was able to track down a copy myself, but it's not on streaming, not on Blu-ray, not on DVD, or at least those Blu-rays and DVDs are out of print, so they're marked up as they're rare. But be on the lookout for this one. It may end up popping back up onto streaming one day. That's one of those reasons why I like to collect as much physical media as I can. I know that I can have the movie available. But there are some clips about it on YouTube. But also, if you've seen it, sound off in the comments. Do you have any recollection of this movie? Was it one that was kind of on high cable rotation one summer like it was for me? But at any rate, silly 80s movie that hopefully, if it sounds interesting one day, you'll be able to track it down and give it a watch. Anyways, that's all that I have for this one. Thanks for coming by and sticking around to the end, as it really does help out quite a bit. As usual, if you enjoyed, please give me a thumbs up, and if not already a subscriber, consider subscribing. And that way you can check out my back catalog, come back to some of these links that are coming up in just a moment, and I will see you in the next one.